On the proudest night of my son's life, a waitress gripped my arm so hard her knuckles turned white. "Sir, don't let him sign those papers. Please." I almost laughed. We were standing in the middle of a 200-guest celebration at the Forsyth Park mansion. My son had just graduated top of his class. But then I looked into her eyes and saw something that stopped me cold. Pure terror. 15 minutes later, I understood why. Before we go any further, I want to say thank you for being here with me. If this story has already caught your attention, take a second to leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is in your part of the world right now. I always read them, and it truly means more than you know. And one important note before we continue. While this story is rooted in deep emotions and meaningful lessons, certain details have been shaped for storytelling purposes, to protect privacy and highlight the message behind it. Now, let us continue. I woke up that Saturday the same way I had woken up every morning for the past 6 years. Alone in a bed meant for two. The right side of the mattress was smooth, untouched, holding the shape of a woman who would never return to it. Sunlight pushed through the tall windows of the Manning estate, spilling across the hardwood floors and catching the dust that floated through the stillness like tiny ghosts. Catherine, for the first year after she passed, I used to reach for her in those soft, half-conscious seconds between sleep and memory. My hand would slide across the cool sheets, searching for warmth that was no longer there. By the second year, I stopped reaching. By the sixth, I simply lay still and let the silence press into my chest like a stone. 6 years since cancer had taken her. 6 years of learning to exist without the woman who had been my compass, my conscience. And the only person in this world who could look at me and know exactly what I was thinking before I said a word. But that morning was not about grief. It was about Daniel. I pushed back the covers and walked to the window. The estate grounds stretched out below, wide and green beneath the Savannah sun. Ancient live oaks lined the property, their branches draped in Spanish moss that swayed like slow curtains in the breeze. On the south lawn, a crew of workers was assembling tables beneath white tent canopies. Florists carried armfuls of gardenias and magnolias toward the main entrance. A catering truck idled near the kitchen door, its crew unloading silver trays and crystal glassware. Tonight, the Forsyth Park mansion would host the celebration I had spent 3 months planning. 200 guests, a live jazz quartet, a 5-course dinner prepared by one of Savannah's finest chefs, and at the center of it all, my son, Daniel Victor Manning, 27 years old, top of his class at Emory University School of Law. Catherine would have loved this. She would have been up before dawn, barefoot on the kitchen tile, directing florists with the calm authority of a general and the warmth of a woman who never forgot to say please. She would have cried into her coffee while pretending she was not crying. She would have held Daniel's face between her hands and told him she always knew he would do something extraordinary. Instead, it was just me. Standing at that window, I made a quiet promise to the empty room. I will make sure he is ready, Catherine. I will protect him the way you would have wanted. I did not know then what that promise would cost me. By late morning, the house hummed with activity. I climbed the stairs to the second floor and knocked on Daniel's door. The sound of music cut off abruptly. "Coming, Dad." I stepped inside and felt something shift in my chest. Daniel stood near the window, adjusting his tie in the mirror. He wore a navy suit that Catherine had picked out 2 years before she died. She had bought it a size too large, saying he would grow into it. She was right. He had grown into it perfectly. He turned to me with a grin so wide it made him look like he was 12 again. "Well, how do I look?" "Like your mother's son," I said. My voice caught, just slightly. His grin softened. "I wish she could see this." "She can." We stood there for a moment, neither of us speaking. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This was your grandfather's," I said, opening it. Inside was a gold watch, worn at the edges, the glass face scratched from decades of use. He gave it to me the day I started the company. told me that a man's word and his time are the only things that truly belong to him. I want you to have it. Daniel took the watch carefully, turning it over in his hands. His eyes glistened. Dad, I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. Just wear it tonight. And remember where you come from. He put the watch on, and I saw his jaw tighten the way it did when he was trying not to cry. He looked so much like Catherine in that moment that my chest ached. A knock interrupted us. The door opened and there she was. Sloane Whitfield stepped into the room wearing a cream-colored dress that looked like it had been designed specifically for her. Her dark hair was swept to one side, falling in soft waves over her shoulder. She smiled at Daniel first, the kind of smile that made a room feel warmer, and then turned to me. Good morning, Victor. The grounds look absolutely beautiful. You have outdone yourself. Thank you, Sloane. I had some help. She crossed the room and kissed Daniel on the cheek, her hand resting lightly on his arm. They looked perfect together. She was poised, articulate, well-educated, the kind of woman other fathers would have celebrated. So why did something inside me tighten? It was not anything I could name. Not a thought. Not even a feeling, exactly. More like a vibration, low and persistent, humming beneath the surface of an otherwise beautiful morning. I had felt dizzy twice already that day. A slight unsteadiness when I stood too quickly. A faint bruise on my forearm I did not remember getting. My doctor had called it age. I had believed him. As Sloane spoke to Daniel about the seating arrangements, her gaze drifted, just for a fraction of a second, toward my study. The door was open. On the desk inside, clearly visible from the hallway, sat a leather folder containing the documents I planned to sign that evening. The trust transfer. $15 million. Daniel's inheritance, made official. Her eyes lingered on that folder for no more than a heartbeat. Then she looked back at Daniel and laughed at something he said. And the moment vanished, as if it had never happened. I told myself I had imagined it. I told myself every father feels this way when his son falls in love. I told myself to stop looking for shadows on the proudest day of my life. I did not know then that ignoring that moment would nearly cost me everything. The Forsyth Park mansion had hosted weddings, governor's dinners, and debutante balls for over 100 years. Its iron gates had opened for generals, senators, and old Savannah families whose names were carved into the very foundation of the city. That evening, 200 guests gathered beneath its arched colonnades and candlelit chandeliers to celebrate my son, and somewhere among them, moving quietly between the tables, was a woman who would save my life before the night was over. Though I did not know her name yet, the South Garden had been transformed. Crystal string lights hung between the live oaks like low-hanging stars, casting a warm amber glow over white linen tables set with gold-rimmed china and fresh magnolia centerpieces. A jazz quartet played beneath the main canopy, their music drifting across the manicured lawn and mixing with the hum of laughter and conversation. The evening air was thick with the scent of gardenias and warm bread from the catering stations. I stood near the garden entrance watching it all unfold, a glass of bourbon in my hand that I had barely touched. 200 people filled the space. Business partners, family, friends, professors from Emory, neighbors who had known Daniel since he was riding his bicycle up and down Abercorn Street. They mingled and laughed and clinked their glasses, and all of it should have made me happy. It did make me happy. But happiness, when you carry it alone, has a weight to it that other people do not see. Catherine should have been standing beside me. She would have been wearing that emerald green dress she saved for special occasions, the one that made her eyes look like sea glass. She would have squeezed my hand and whispered, "Stop worrying, Victor. He is going to be wonderful." And I would have believed her, because I always believed her. She looks happy. He looks ready. You did good, Vic. I turned. My brother Thomas stood beside me, holding 2 glasses of bourbon. He was 3 years younger, an inch shorter, and had the kind of face that had never quite learned how to hide what it was feeling. Tonight it was showing pride. The same pride I felt. "Thank you, Tommy," He handed me a fresh glass and raised his own. To Daniel. To Daniel. We drank. Thomas glanced across the garden to where Daniel stood near the stage, surrounded by classmates and professors. Sloane was at his side, her hand resting on his arm, laughing at something one of the professors said. She looked effortless, graceful, like she had been born to stand in rooms like this. She is something, Thomas said, nodding toward Sloane. Daniel picked well. He did, I replied. But the words felt heavier than they should have. Across the lawn, I noticed a man I did not recognize approaching Daniel with a confident stride. Tall, early 30s, wearing a charcoal suit that fit too well for a guest who was not family. He shook Daniel's hand with both of his, leaned in close, and said something that made Daniel laugh. "Who is that?" I asked Thomas. "Bryce Callahan. Daniel's attorney. Handles his legal affairs now. Sloane introduced them about 6 months ago. I did not know Daniel needed an attorney." Thomas shrugged. "Smart kid planning ahead. Nothing wrong with that." I watched Bryce Callahan move through the crowd with the ease of someone who understood the value of being liked. He shook hands firmly, remembered names, complimented wives on their dresses. He was polished in a way that felt practiced, like a man who had studied charm the way other men studied law. At one point, he passed close to Sloane. Their eyes met for no more than a second. She gave the faintest nod, so subtle that anyone who was not watching closely would have missed it entirely. Then she turned back to Daniel and kissed his cheek. I filed it away. Told myself it was nothing. The microphone crackled to life, and the evening's master of ceremonies, a family friend named Walter Price, stepped onto the small stage beneath the main oak. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "it is my absolute pleasure to introduce tonight's guest of honor, a young man who graduated top of his class at Emory University School of Law. A young man whose mother, Catherine, would be bursting with pride if she could see him tonight. Please welcome Daniel Victor Manning." The applause was immediate and warm. Daniel climbed the steps to the stage, adjusting his tie with a nervous smile that reminded me so much of Catherine my chest physically hurt. He cleared his throat and looked out over the crowd. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice steady but soft. "This degree has my name on it, but it belongs to a lot of people. To my professors, who pushed me harder than I thought I could handle. To my friends, who kept me sane when I wanted to quit." He paused. "To my mother, Catherine Manning, who is not here tonight, but who taught me that the measure of a person is not what they achieve. It is what they give back." The garden went silent. I felt Thomas's hand on my shoulder. "And to my father." Daniel's eyes found mine across the crowd. "Dad, you built everything we have with your own hands. You never asked for recognition. You never took shortcuts. You taught me that integrity is not something you talk about. It is something you live. Everything I am is because of you." I could not speak. My throat closed around something too large to swallow. 200 people were watching, and all I could see was my son standing in the light, wearing his grandfather's watch, honoring the woman we both loved. The applause washed over me like a wave. Thomas squeezed my shoulder. "Kathy is smiling right now, Vic. I promise you that." When the applause faded, Walter returned to the microphone. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, a very special moment. Victor Manning will join his son on stage to make an important announcement regarding the future of Manning Development Group." This was it. The moment I had planned for months. The trust transfer. $15 million. Officially placed in Daniel's name. The symbolic passing of a legacy that Catherine and I had built together from nothing. I straightened my jacket, set my bourbon on the nearest table, took one step toward the stage, then a second step, then a third, and that is when the fingers closed around my wrist, tight, trembling. A woman's grip, stronger than it should have been, fueled by something more powerful than muscle. I turned. She was short, dark-haired, dressed in the black and white uniform of the venue's catering staff. A name tag pinned to her chest read Rosa. Her face was flushed, her breathing was uneven, and her eyes held something I had seen only once before in my life, on the face of a doctor who had just told me my wife had 6 months to live. It was fear. Deep, genuine, unperformable fear. "Sir," she whispered, her accent faintly. "Central American." Her voice barely audible beneath the music. "Don't let him sign those papers. Please." She glanced over her shoulder, then back at me. "If you love your son, you need to come with me. Right now." The applause continued behind me. Walter was gesturing toward the stage. Daniel stood under the spotlight, smiling, waiting for his father. And a woman I had never met before was begging me to walk away from the proudest moment of my life. I should have pulled away. I should have smiled politely, told her I appreciated her concern, and stepped onto that stage where my son was waiting under the spotlight. Every rational thought in my body told me to do exactly that. But there was something in her eyes that would not let me go. Not desperation, not drama, something quieter and far more dangerous. It was the look of a person who had seen something she was not supposed to see and understood exactly what it meant. Catherine used to say that when someone is genuinely afraid, you do not question them. You listen. I had not always been good at listening, but that night, standing 3 steps from the proudest moment of my life, I heard my wife's voice more clearly than I had in years. "Listen, 1 minute," I told Rosa. "That is all I can give you. That is all I need," she said. I glanced back toward the stage. Walter was improvising, telling a story about Daniel's childhood that drew laughter from the crowd. Daniel stood to the side, scanning the garden for me with a puzzled expression. Sloane leaned close to whisper something to him, and he nodded. Rosa led me through a service entrance I had never noticed before. A narrow door flush with the garden wall, painted the same ivory as the surrounding stone. We passed into a corridor that ran behind the main hall. The transformation was instant. The string lights and jazz music vanished, replaced by fluorescent tubes humming overhead, bare concrete walls, and the sharp clatter of dishes being washed somewhere nearby. The air changed too. Out in the garden it had been warm, fragrant, filled with magnolias and candle wax. In here it smelled like industrial soap and hot metal. Waitstaff moved briskly past us carrying trays, too focused on their tasks to notice a guest being led through their workspace. Rosa walked quickly, her shoes silent on the tile floor. She turned a corner, then another, and finally pushed open the door to a small storage room. Mop buckets, folded chairs, stacked crates of glassware, cleaning supplies on metal shelves. She ushered me inside and pulled the door nearly shut, leaving it open just a crack. "What is this about?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "I have worked at this venue for 8 years, Mr. Manning. I know every room, every hallway, every corner where people think they cannot be seen." She paused, steadying her breath. 30 minutes ago, I went to the coat check room to collect a guest jacket. The door was partially open. I heard voices inside. I stopped. "Whose voices?" "The woman your son is with. And the man in the gray suit. The lawyer. Sloane. And Bryce." My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression even. "What did you hear?" Rosa opened her mouth to answer, but then her head turned sharply toward the corridor. She pressed a finger to her lips and leaned toward the crack in the door. Footsteps. 2 sets. One, clicking softly in heels. The other heavier, deliberate. Then voices. "You need to relax." A woman's voice. Smooth, confident, unhurried. "Sloane." "I am relaxed," a man replied. "Bryce." "I just want to make sure we are on the same page before he signs." "We have been on the same page for 18 months, Bryce." Nothing has changed. They were close. Just outside the storage room, standing in the corridor no more than 10 feet from where I was hiding. I could hear the faint rustle of fabric as one of them shifted their weight. Once he signs tonight, Sloan continued, the trust unlocks. $15 million. Direct access. The number hung in the air like smoke. 15 million. My trust. Daniel's inheritance. And the company? Bryce asked. That takes longer. The old man needs to step aside first. My breath caught. The old man. She was talking about me. The words were casual, almost clinical, as if she were discussing a business projection rather than a human life. How long? Bryce pressed. I have been working on it for 3 months already. 3 months. The same 3 months during which Sloan had been living in my son's apartment, cooking meals, joining us for Sunday dinners, kissing me on the cheek and calling me Victor with that warm, easy smile. The blood thinners are doing exactly what they are supposed to do, she said. Her tone did not change. There was no hesitation, no lowered voice, no sign that what she was saying carried any moral weight at all. He has been dizzy, bruising easily. His own doctor thinks it is age-related. Another 6 months, maybe less. Heart failure, natural causes. No one will question it. The world stopped. Not figuratively, not poetically. It stopped. The fluorescent light above me seemed to freeze mid-flicker. The distant sound of dishes faded to nothing. Even my own heartbeat went silent for one terrible, endless second. Blood thinners. 3 months. She had been poisoning me. Every morning for the past 3 months, Sloan had arrived at the Manning estate with a bright smile and a tall glass of green smoothie. It is a new recipe, she had told me the first time. Spinach, ginger, turmeric. My nutritionist swears by it. Let me take care of you, Victor. And I had drunk it. Every single morning, I had thanked her for it. Every dizzy spell in the shower. Every bruise on my forearm that appeared from nothing. Every moment of lightheadedness that made me grip the kitchen counter and wait for the room to stop tilting. My doctor had looked at me with kind eyes and said, Victor, you are 61. These things happen. They had not happened. They had been done to me. Measured, calculated, and delivered in a glass by a woman who kissed my son goodnight and called me family. I pressed my back against the cold wall of the storage room and tried to breathe. My lungs felt like they had been filled with wet cement. Rosa was watching me. Her face was pale, her hand covering her mouth. She had heard it too. Both times now. Once before, when she had stumbled upon them in the coat check room. And now again, standing beside a man who had just learned that the woman his son loved was slowly, methodically, killing him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burst through that door and wrap my hands around Sloan Whitfield's throat. I wanted to run to the garden and pull Daniel off that stage and shake him until he understood. But I could not move. Because my legs had stopped working, and because somewhere deep inside the part of my brain that still functioned, I understood something with terrible clarity. If I acted now, I would lose everything. Daniel would not believe me. Sloan would deny it. Bryce would back her story. And the only evidence I had was the trembling word of a waitress and the echo of a conversation in a service corridor. I had nothing, and the woman who was killing me was standing 15 feet away, adjusting her dress and preparing to walk back into my son's celebration as if she had not just discussed my death like a quarterly earnings report. My lungs stopped working. Not figuratively. I literally could not draw a breath. For 3 months, the woman who kissed my son good morning had been measuring poison into my glass. Every dizzy spell, every unexplained bruise. Every time my doctor said it is just age, Victor. It was not age. It was her. Sloane's voice continued on the other side of the door, as if she were discussing vacation plans. Daniel worships me, she said. There was no affection in it. No warmth. She said it the way someone describes a useful tool. He will sign whatever I put in front of him. He already has. The trust authorization, the insurance amendment, all of it. He thinks it is standard paperwork. He does not read what Bryce prepares. He trusts us. The word trusts landed like a blade between my ribs. My son. The boy who had just stood on a stage in front of 200 people and told the world that integrity was something you live. He trusted the woman beside him with everything he had, and she had turned that trust into a weapon. Once Victor is gone and I control Daniel, Sloane continued, her voice dropping slightly, not from guilt but from caution. Everything flows through me. Through us. The trust. The company. The estate. All of it. A pause. Then Bryce's voice. Closer now. Quieter. Promise me this works. I promise. Sloane's tone softened in a way I had never heard before. Not the softness she used with Daniel, which I now understood was performance. This was something real. Something intimate. By this time next year, we will have everything. A new life. Together. I heard movement. The faint shift of fabric. The sound of breath drawn close. Through the crack in the door, I saw it. Bryce stepped forward and pressed his lips to Sloane's. It was not rushed. It was not stolen. It was familiar, practiced, the kind of kiss shared between people who had been doing it for a long time and saw no reason to stop. She held his face with both hands. He rested his palm against the small of her back. They stood there in the fluorescent light of a service corridor while 200 people celebrated my son's future 50 feet above them, and they kissed like lovers who had already won. I should get back, Sloane said finally, pulling away but keeping her hand on his chest. People will notice. Go. I will follow in a few minutes. She smoothed the front of her dress, the same cream-colored dress that had looked so elegant when she had walked into Daniel's room that morning. She checked her reflection in the dark glass of a fire extinguisher case mounted to the wall, adjusted a strand of hair, and walked away. Her heels clicked against the tile in a rhythm that sounded like counting. Bryce remained. He straightened his tie, rolled his shoulders, and checked his phone. Then he slipped it into his pocket and followed the same corridor Sloane had taken, moving in the opposite direction so they would not arrive at the garden from the same entrance. They had done this before. The choreography was too smooth, the timing too natural. This was not impulsive. It was routine. The storage room fell silent. Rosa closed the door fully, sealing us in near darkness. The only light came from the thin gap beneath the door, a pale stripe of fluorescent glow cutting across the concrete floor. "Now do you believe me?" she whispered. I could not answer. My mind was still replaying Sloane's words in a loop that would not stop. Daniel worships me. Once Victor is gone, everything flows through me. Blood thinners. 3 months. By this time next year, Rosa reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a small card. She pressed it into my shaking hand. It was a simple white card with a phone number written in blue ink. Nothing else. "My number," she said. "If you need someone to tell the truth, if you need a witness, a statement, anything, I will do it." I stared at the card. My fingers were trembling so badly I could barely hold it. "Why?" I managed. "You do not even know us." She hesitated for just a moment. Then she said something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "Because I have 2 children, Mr. Manning. Maria is 11. Tomas is 8. I raised them alone. I work 2 jobs so they can go to a good school." Her eyes glistened in the dim light. "And no one in this world should die because they trusted the wrong person. If someone knew my children were in danger, I would pray they would speak up. So I am speaking up." She held my gaze, steady and unwavering, and in that moment she was the bravest person I had ever met. Not because she was unafraid, she was terrified. I could see it in the way her hands trembled, in the way she kept glancing at the door. She was risking her job, possibly her safety, for a man she had served drinks to 3 hours ago. "Thank you," I whispered. "Do not thank me yet," she said. "Be careful. People like them do not stop easily." She cracked the door open and checked the hallway. "It is clear. Go back upstairs. Go back to the party. Smile." Act like nothing happened. And then, she looked at me one last time. Then you figure out how to protect your son. She slipped through the door and disappeared down the corridor, her footsteps fading into the mechanical hum of the kitchen. I stood alone in the storage room for what felt like an hour, but was probably 30 seconds. Above me, the band was playing. Glasses were clinking. My son was waiting on a stage for his father to come and sign a document that would hand $15 million to the woman who was slowly killing me. I put Rosa's card in my jacket pocket. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I straightened my tie, and I walked back into the light. The garden was exactly as I had left it. Warm, glowing, alive with celebration. Daniel saw me approaching and smiled with relief. "Dad, where were you?" "We were about to send a search party." "Stomach," I said, touching my midsection. Something did not agree with me. I stepped inside for a minute. "Are you okay?" "I am fine." Sloane appeared beside Daniel, her hand finding his arm with practiced ease. "Victor, you look pale. Can I get you some water?" I looked at her. At the woman who had just discussed my death with the calm precision of an accountant closing a ledger. She smiled at me. The same warm, effortless smile she had given me that morning. The same smile she had probably given Richard Kemp in Jacksonville before she took $1.2 million of his life. "Water would be wonderful, Sloane." "Thank you." She touched my shoulder as she passed. Her fingers were cool. I turned to Daniel. "Son, I have decided to postpone the signing. Henry Aldridge wants one final review of the documents. Just a formality. We will do it next week." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine. Just being thorough. Your grandfather always said, never sign anything after bourbon." He laughed, and the sound nearly broke me. Across the garden, I saw Bryce standing near the bar, a glass of scotch in his hand. He was watching me. When our eyes met, he raised his glass in a small salute and smiled. The same smile he had worn when I had shaken his hand earlier that evening. The same smile a man wears when he believes he is the smartest person in the room. I shook Bryce's hand and felt the warmth of a man who had just discussed my murder with the casualness of a dinner order. "Great party," he said. "It really is," I replied, and I smiled. Because that is what you do when you are standing in a room full of people who do not know that the celebration they are enjoying is built on a foundation of poison, fraud, and betrayal. The drive home passed in silence. Not the comfortable silence of a man enjoying the night air. The silence of a man whose reality had been dismantled in a storage closet and reassembled into something he did not recognize. Savannah at midnight was beautiful, in a way that felt almost cruel. Empty streets lined with live oaks, Spanish moss hanging motionless, gas lanterns flickering on wrought iron posts outside century-old homes. I drove past all of it and saw none of it. The Manning estate was dark when I pulled in. I shut off the engine and sat in the car for a long time, staring at the front door. When I finally went inside, the sound of my keys dropping onto the entry table echoed through the house like something falling in a cathedral. Everything was too large. The foyer, the hallway, the staircase, curving upward into shadow. This house had been built for a family. Now it held one man, and the ghost of everything he had failed to see. I climbed the stairs slowly. In the master bedroom, I loosened my tie and sat on the edge of the bed. Catherine's side was smooth, untouched for 6 years. I stared at the ceiling and waited for something to make sense. It did not. I moved to the study. Catherine's portrait hung above the fireplace, painted the year before her diagnosis. She was laughing in it. Head tilted slightly, eyes bright with the kind of joy that does not perform for anyone. Framed photographs lined the desk. Daniel at 5, holding a fish nearly as big as he was. Daniel at 12, covered in mud after his first football game. Daniel at 18, graduation cap crooked. Catherine's arm wrapped around his shoulders. I pulled the last photograph closer. Catherine looked directly at the camera, directly at me, with an expression that said, "I know you better than you know yourself." "You would have seen it," I whispered. "You would have known the moment she walked through our door." Catherine had instincts I never developed. She could read people the way musicians read sheet music. She would have watched Sloane pour that first smoothie and felt the dissonance. She would have seen through Bryce Callahan before he finished shaking her hand. But she was not here. And I had missed everything. I opened my laptop and began writing notes, assembling the pieces I had dismissed as harmless. Sloane arriving at the charity event where she met Daniel 18 months ago. A coincidence, I had thought. Now I understood it was placement. Bryce being introduced 6 months ago as Daniel's attorney. The best young lawyer in Savannah, Sloane had said. Now I knew he was not a lawyer at all. The smoothies beginning 3 months ago. "Let me take care of you, Victor." Every morning. The same glass. The same smile. The same poison. The casual questions. Sloane asking about the company's valuation at Sunday dinner. Bryce inquiring about what would happen if I became incapacitated. "Just making sure Daniel is protected," he had said. The insurance amendment 4 months ago. Daniel had mentioned it offhandedly. "Sloane is listed as my fiancé now." Bryce said it was standard, $8 million. I had not questioned it. The dizziness. The bruises. The fatigue. I blamed on age. The doctor visits that revealed nothing, because no one was looking for warfarin in a man who had no reason to be on blood thinners. The red flags had been there for months, lined up like signal flares on a dark highway, and I had driven past every one because my son was happy, and I wanted to believe the woman who made him happy was real. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Dad, tonight was the best night of my life. Thank you for everything. I love you." I read it 3 times. Each time, it cut deeper. My son was sleeping beside a woman who was systematically poisoning his father and dismantling his future. And he had no idea. "I am so proud of you, son. Your mother would be too. Get some rest. Love you." The clock read 2:15 in the morning. Sleep was not coming. Not tonight. By 3, I had moved from grief to something harder. Not anger exactly. Anger is hot and reactive. This was colder, more deliberate. The same feeling I had experienced 40 years ago when I started the company with nothing but a truck and a handshake. The understanding that no one was going to fix this for me. By 5, the first gray light of dawn bled through the study windows. I stood and looked out at the estate grounds. The same lawn where Daniel had learned to throw a football. The same garden where Catherine had planted roses every spring until her hands could no longer hold the trowel. I picked up my phone and made 3 calls. The first was to Henry Aldridge, my attorney for 30 years. "Henry, it is Victor. I need to see you today. It is urgent. What has happened? I cannot explain over the phone. Can you meet me at 9? Of course. The second was to Hank Morrison. Retired United States Marshal, Catherine's college friend. The man who had stood beside me at her funeral and said, "Anything you need. Vic. Anytime." I promised Kathy. I had never called in that promise until now. "Hank, I need your help. I need you to investigate 2 people. My son's girlfriend and his attorney." "How bad?" "Bad enough that I am calling you at 5 in the morning. I will be at Henry's office at 9. The third was to Thomas. "Tommy, I need you at Henry's office. 9 o'clock. Vic, what is going on? I will explain when I see you. Just be there." "I will." I set the phone down. Dawn crept across the ceiling. Slow and golden. Catherine's portrait caught the first light, and for a moment, she seemed to glow. I should have seen it sooner, I told her. But I see it now. The house was silent. But the silence had changed. It was no longer emptiness or grief. It was the silence before the first move in a very dangerous game. It was preparation. Henry Aldridge had represented the Manning family for 30 years. He had drafted the documents that built our company, written the trusts that protected our assets, and held Catherine's hand in the hospital when I could not stop shaking long enough to hold it myself. In all that time, across hundreds of meetings, I had never seen him lose the color in his face. Until that Monday morning. His office occupied the 12th floor of a glass and limestone building in Savannah's financial district. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the Savannah River, where cargo ships drifted slowly toward the port. The room smelled of leather and old paper, lined with mahogany shelves holding decades of legal volumes. I had walked into this office hundreds of times and always felt steady. That morning I felt like the floor was made of water. Thomas was already there when I arrived, sitting rigidly in one of the leather chairs, his hands clasped between his knees. Henry stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call the moment he saw my face. "Peter." He crossed the room. "You look like you have not slept." "I have not." "Sit down. Tell me what happened." I sat. And I told him everything. The party, Rose's warning, the storage room, Sloane's voice detailing the trust fund and the blood thinners, Bryce's kiss, the casual way they had discussed my death as if scheduling a meeting. I watched Henry's expression shift as I spoke. Concern became disbelief. Disbelief became calculation. And calculation became the cold, focused attention of a man who had spent 3 decades fighting in courtrooms. When I finished, the room was silent. Thomas had not moved. His face was gray. "She has been poisoning you," Thomas said slowly. "In our mother's kitchen. With a smoothie." "Yes." Henry moved to his desk without a word and opened his laptop. Within minutes, he was pulling files, printing documents, spreading papers across the mahogany surface with the methodical urgency of a surgeon who has just discovered the patient is bleeding from somewhere no one checked. "Let us start with the trust," he said. He slid a document across to me. I recognized the format. $15 million trust. Established when Daniel turned 25. Standard distribution structure. But look here. He pointed to a clause near the bottom. 4 months ago, Bryce Callahan added language allowing an authorized representative to access the funds on Daniel's behalf with written consent. Daniel signed that consent? He did. Along with 6 other documents Bryce prepared over the past 4 months. Daniel believed they were routine paperwork related to his inheritance planning. Henry's jaw tightened. They were not routine. He pulled up a second file, life insurance, $8 million policy on your life. Original beneficiary was Daniel. 4 months ago, the beneficiary was changed. He turned the screen toward me. Sloane Whitfield. Listed as fiancé. My stomach dropped. Daniel told me that was standard. It is not standard. It is strategic. Thomas leaned forward. She changed the beneficiary on his father's life insurance, and he did not even question it? He trusted her, I said. He trusted both of them. There is more, Henry said. He navigated to another file. Your corporate succession plan. Manning Development Group. Valued at approximately $52 million. The original structure is clean. If you pass away, Daniel inherits your controlling shares. But 3 months ago, Bryce inserted an amendment. He scrolled to the relevant section and read aloud. If the primary heir inherits and subsequently becomes incapacitated or delegates authority, their spouse or designated partner shall assume voting rights and operational control. The room tilted. Sloane is not his wife. Not yet. But if they marry, and if you die, and if Daniel is manipulated into delegating authority, she controls a $52 million company. Henry folded his hands on the desk. Let me put it together for you. Trust fund, $15 million. Life insurance, $8 million. Corporate succession, $52 million. Total potential exposure. He paused. $75 million. Victor, that is what you and Daniel are worth to them. Dead or controlled? Thomas stood abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. He walked to the window and pressed his forehead against the glass. 75 million, he whispered. And she has been poisoning him in our mother's house. We need proof before we act, Henry said firmly. If you confront them now, they destroy evidence, turn Daniel against you, and lawyer up. Bryce may not be a legitimate attorney, but he clearly understands the system well enough to exploit it. We need to be smarter. I have already started, I said. I am meeting someone this afternoon. Henry nodded. Good. In the meantime, I will begin quietly auditing every document Bryce has filed on Daniel's behalf. If he forged signatures or misrepresented the amendments, that is criminal fraud on top of everything else. I left Henry's office carrying a folder thick with printouts and the weight of 75 million reasons why 2 people wanted me dead. At 2 that afternoon, I walked into a small cafe on River Street. The place was narrow and dim, tucked between an antique shop and a bookstore, the kind of establishment where conversations disappeared into the noise of espresso machines and tourists passing outside. I took a booth in the back corner. Hank Morrison arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. He was 55, built like a man who still ran 5 miles every morning, with close-cropped gray hair and steady eyes that had spent 12 years reading liars across federal interrogation tables. He slid into the booth across from me and declined the waitress's offer of coffee. Tell me, he said simply. I told him everything I had told Henry, plus the details I had compiled overnight. The timeline, the smoothies, the insurance changes, the 75 million. Hank listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for several seconds. Kathy asked me to watch over you 2, he said finally. She made me promise the day before her last surgery. Said she knew you would be too stubborn to ask for help. He looked at me steadily. I am glad you finally called. He outlined his plan. Full background investigation on Sloan Whitfield and Bryce Callahan. Financial records, criminal history, prior addresses, previous relationships, digital forensics on any publicly accessible information, contact with previous victims if they existed, and most urgently, a full toxicology panel on my blood. He reached into his jacket and slid a small object across the table. It looked like an ordinary ballpoint pen. Recording device, he said. Voice activated. Legal in Georgia, under single-party consent. You are part of the conversation. You can record it. I picked it up. It was lighter than I expected. One more thing, Hank added. His voice dropped. Go to your doctor tomorrow. Full blood panel. Toxicology screening. Do not tell anyone why. He paused. And Victor, stop drinking those smoothies. Hank's preliminary report arrived at 3:17 on Wednesday afternoon. I know the exact time, because I had been refreshing my inbox every few minutes since lunch, the way a man waits for test results he already fears. When his name appeared in bold, my pulse jumped hard enough to hurt. The subject line read confidential findings. The attachment was password protected. I typed in the name of the cafe where we had met on River Street. The document unlocked. I read it once. Then I locked the study door, turned off the lights, and read it again in the glow of the screen. Because the woman who had been sleeping under my son's roof was not just a liar. She was a professional, Sloan Whitfield. Born and raised in Savannah. Her father, Gerald Whitfield, had been a mid-level real estate developer, with a name that once meant something in this city. Good neighborhood, good schools. Membership at the Oglethorpe Club. The kind of family that appeared in society pages and attended the right charity galas. Then 2019 happened. Gerald Whitfield had leveraged everything on a waterfront development project that collapsed when his primary investor pulled out. Bankruptcy followed. The house on East Gaston Street was sold. The club membership lapsed. The family name, which had taken 3 generations to build, dissolved in a single quarter. Gerald died of a stroke 18 months later. Sloan's mother moved to a small apartment in Pooler. Sloan, who had been halfway through law school at the University of Georgia, dropped out. She was 25, broke, and watching the life she had been promised evaporate. That was where the story most people knew ended. Hank's report showed where the real story began. Jacksonville, Florida. 2021. Sloan relocated there under her own name and began working as an assistant at a wealth management firm. Within 3 months, she had identified a target. Richard Kemp, 58. Divorced. Owner of a regional logistics company, valued at $14 million. Sloan engineered a meeting at a client dinner. They began dating. Within 6 months, she had access to his personal accounts, his estate planning documents, and his trust. She took $1.2 million through a series of wire transfers disguised as investment repositioning. By the time Kemp realized what had happened, Sloan had vanished. He never pressed charges. Hank's notes said Kemp told his investigator he was too embarrassed to go public. A successful businessman conned by a woman half his age. He ate the loss and moved on. Sloan did not move on. She evolved. Hank's timeline showed she reconnected with Bryce Callahan 20 months ago. They had dated briefly in college before Gerald's bankruptcy. Bryce, it turned out, had his own trajectory of failure. He had practiced law in Tampa, Florida, until 2020, when the Florida bar revoked his license for misappropriation of client funds. $140,000 skimmed from an elderly client's estate. He avoided prosecution by repaying part of the amount, then disappeared. He resurfaced in Savannah 16 months ago under his real name but without disclosing his disbarment. He presented himself as a young attorney building a private practice. No one checked. Sloan introduced him to Daniel as a trusted legal professional. The financial trail Hank uncovered made my chest tighten. Over the past 12 months, approximately $350,000 had been moved from Manning Development Group accounts through a series of shell companies into offshore accounts linked to Bryce. The transactions were small enough to avoid automated auditing flags. $5,000 here, $8,000 there, spread across dozens of transfers, buried in operational expenses and vendor payments. $350,000. Stolen from the company Catherine and I had built from nothing. But the report did not stop there. Hank had obtained the results of my toxicology panel. I had gone to the doctor Tuesday morning, as instructed. Blood drawn. Full screening. The results had been forwarded to Hank by secure email. Warfarin. Present in my bloodstream at levels significantly above therapeutic range. The report included a note from the lab technician flagging the finding as abnormal for a patient with no prescription for anticoagulant medication. Hank had attached a separate analysis from a toxicologist he consulted. The expert's summary was 3 sentences long, and I read each one as if it were a verdict. The warfarin concentration indicates consistent oral administration over a period of approximately 2 to 3 months. At this sustained dosage, the patient faces elevated risk of internal hemorrhaging, particularly in response to physical trauma or sudden blood pressure changes. A fall, a minor car accident, or even aggressive physical activity could trigger a fatal bleeding event. I sat back in my chair. My hands were shaking. She had not just planned to kill me. She had been killing me every morning, one smoothie at a time, calibrated precisely so that my own doctor would attribute the symptoms to aging, so that when the fatal event eventually came, whether it was a fall down the stairs or a sudden collapse in the garden, no one would think to look for poison. They would look at a 61-year-old man with declining health and sign a death certificate without a second thought. The final section of Hank's report covered digital forensics. Sloan's search history, recovered from a cloud backup linked to a device she had used at Daniel's apartment. The searches spanned 3 months. Warfarin dosage levels below detection threshold. Blood thinner symptoms in elderly patients. How long before warfarin causes organ damage? Georgia inheritance. Processing timeline after death. Spousal rights to corporate shares in Georgia. Each entry was a nail in a coffin she had been building for me since the day she first handed me that glass and said, "Let me take care of you, Victor." I closed the report and sat in the dark for a long time. Catherine's portrait was barely visible in the faint light from the screen, but I could feel her watching me the way she always had. Patient, steady, waiting for me to decide what kind of man I was going to be. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Dad, Sloan wants to cook dinner for all of us Friday night. Her famous pasta. She says she misses you. Can you come? Her famous pasta. The same kitchen. The same hands that had been measuring warfarin into my morning glass for 90 days. The same smile she would wear as she set the plate in front of me and poured the wine and asked how I was feeling. I stared at the message for a full minute. Then I typed 2 words. I'll be there. I set the phone down and looked at Catherine. A father who knows his child is in danger does not retreat, I said quietly. He plans. Friday evening, I sat at my son's dining table and watched the woman who had been poisoning me for 3 months serve pasta with a smile so warm it could have melted glass. I smiled back. I even complimented the sauce. Daniel's apartment occupied the 2nd floor of a restored Victorian on East Jones Street in the historic district. High ceilings, original crown molding, tall windows overlooking a courtyard tangled with jasmine and crepe myrtle. It was the kind of place young professionals in Savannah aspired to, charming and expensive. And I knew that the rent was being paid with money Bryce had siphoned from my company. Sloan greeted me at the door with a hug that lasted 2 seconds longer than necessary. Victor, I am so glad you came. Daniel has been talking about this all week. She smelled like rosemary and vanilla, the scent of a woman who wanted to seem domestic, trustworthy, safe. Would not miss it, I said. The recording pen was in my shirt pocket. I had clicked it once in the car. It was already running. Daniel appeared from the bedroom, still adjusting his collar, grinning the way he always did when the people he loved were in the same room. He hugged me tightly. Dad, thanks for coming. Of course, son. The apartment was warm with the smell of garlic and simmering tomato. Sloan moved between the kitchen and the dining area with practiced ease, setting plates, lighting candles, pouring wine. I watched her from the corner of my eye as she filled 4 glasses with a Sangiovese she said she had been saving for a special occasion. When she poured mine, she turned her back to me for just a moment. 1 second. Maybe 2. Her shoulders shifted in a way that had nothing to do with pouring wine. When she turned back, the glass was full, and her smile was flawless. I waited until she moved to the kitchen to check the pasta. Then I swapped my glass with the one she had set at the empty 4th place setting. Smooth. Silent. A lifetime of business negotiations had taught me to move without drawing attention. Dinner began. Daniel talked about his plans for the bar exam, about the firms he was considering, about a pro bono project he wanted to launch helping families in underserved neighborhoods with estate planning. His eyes were bright. His voice carried the kind of hope that only exists in people who have not yet learned what the world is capable of. Sloan listened to him with an expression of such convincing adoration that for one terrible moment, I almost doubted everything I knew. She touched his hand when he spoke. She laughed at his jokes. She looked at him the way Catherine used to look at me. And I had to remind myself that every gesture, every glance, every word was engineered. A knock at the door interrupted the 2nd course. That might be Bryce, Daniel said, standing. I mentioned we were having dinner. He said he might stop by. Of course he did. Bryce Callahan entered the apartment the way he entered every room, as if he owned it. Charcoal blazer, open collar. The kind of casual confidence that came from years of pretending to be someone he was not. He shook my hand firmly. Victor, good to see you. Sorry to crash the party. Not at all, I said. Pull up a chair. Sloan brought him a plate. He sat across from me. And for a moment, the 4 of us looked like exactly what they wanted the world to see. A family. A father, his son's girlfriend, and his son's trusted attorney, sharing a meal on a Friday night in one of Savannah's most beautiful neighborhoods. The conversation drifted. Bryce steered it gradually, the way a man steers a boat toward rocks while pointing at the horizon. He started with the company. How was business? How are the new developments progressing? Then he narrowed his focus. Victor, I have been thinking about the succession structure, he said, setting down his fork with studied casualness. Given your health concerns lately, do you think we should accelerate the transition timeline? I looked at him steadily. What health concerns? Daniel mentioned you have been dizzy, bruising easily. He tilted his head with an expression of manufactured sympathy. At your age, these things can escalate quickly. I just want to make sure Daniel is protected if something unexpected happens. My doctor says I am fine, I replied. Doctors miss things, Bryce said. I have seen it happen. Perfectly healthy men. And then one day, he snapped his fingers softly. That is why planning matters. You are very thorough, Bryce. It is my job. Across the table, Sloane watched the exchange without speaking. Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the stem of her wine glass. She knew what Bryce was doing. She had probably scripted it. I turned to Daniel and softened my voice. How are you feeling about everything, son? The bar exam? The company? All of it? Daniel smiled. Honestly, best I have ever felt. I have got Sloane. I have got Bryce, handling the legal side. And I have got you. I feel like everything is finally coming together. The words should have warmed me. Instead, they landed like stones in my chest. Everything is finally coming together. He had no idea that the people he trusted most were methodically destroying the foundation beneath him. I stayed another hour. Complimented the tiramisu Sloane made for dessert. Laughed at Daniel's impression of his constitutional law professor. Shook Bryce's hand when he left, and told him I appreciated his dedication. Every word, every smile, every handshake was a performance. And I delivered it flawlessly because my son's life depended on my ability to pretend. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then I called Hank. I got everything, I said. Bryce brought up my health directly. He knows about the symptoms. He is tracking my decline. Good, Hank replied. The pen captured it? Every word. There is something else, Hank said. The wine glass you swapped. Thomas picked it up after you left. I had it tested this afternoon. A pause. Elevated warfarin traces. She is dosing you through the wine now too. Not just the smoothies. I closed my eyes. Even knowing the truth, even expecting it, the confirmation hit like a fist. Victor, Hank continued, and his voice changed. It dropped lower, tighter, the way it did when he was about to deliver the kind of news that alters everything. I need you to sit down. I am sitting. Bryce met with someone yesterday. Before your dinner. A man named Carl Jessup. 48 years old. Former pharmacist. Lost his license 3 years ago for selling controlled substances without prescriptions. He has been operating under the radar since then, providing hard-to-trace compounds to people who pay cash. My hand tightened on the phone. What did he provide? Potassium chloride. Injectable form. It causes cardiac arrest within minutes. Virtually undetectable in a standard autopsy, unless the medical examiner is specifically testing for it. The car was silent. The street was silent. The entire city of Savannah seemed to hold its breath. They are done waiting, Hank said quietly. They are not planning to let the warfarin finish the job. They are ready to kill you outright. I stared through the windshield at the dark canopy of oaks lining East Jones Street. Somewhere behind me, in that beautiful apartment with the jasmine courtyard, my son was clearing dinner plates with a woman who had just served his father poisoned wine, and the man she called his attorney was arranging the purchase of a chemical designed to stop my heart. How long do we have? I asked. Based on the pace they are moving. Days. Maybe a week. Then we move faster. Victor. This changes everything. This is not financial fraud anymore. This is premeditated murder. I know exactly what it is, I said. And I know exactly what I am going to do about it. I had rehearsed the conversation 100 times in my head. I had prepared every word, every document, every pause. I had practiced tone and sequencing with Hank over the phone until the sentences lost their texture and became mechanical. None of it mattered, because nothing prepares a father for watching his son's face shatter. Sunday evening. I stood in the kitchen of the Manning estate making Catherine's pot roast. Her recipe, handwritten on a yellowed index card, I kept in the drawer beside the stove. Rosemary, garlic, slow-roasted carrots, red wine reduction. It was the meal she had made for every important occasion in our family. Daniel's first day of school. His acceptance to Emory. The last Thanksgiving before her diagnosis. If I was about to dismantle my son's world, I wanted his mother's presence in the room. Even if it was only in the smell of rosemary and the memory of her hands moving across this same counter. Daniel arrived at 7. He came through the front door the way he always did. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, jacket over one arm, face bright with the uncomplicated happiness of a young man who believed his life was exactly where it was supposed to be. He hugged me. I held on a second longer than usual. We ate slowly. He talked about the bar exam prep, about a hiking trip he and Sloan were planning for the fall, about a partner at one of the downtown firms who had expressed interest in hiring him. His voice filled the dining room the way Catherine's used to, warm and alive, and completely unaware of the weight pressing down on the man across the table. After the second helping, I set my fork down. "Daniel," I said quietly, "I need to talk to you about Sloan." And Bryce. His smile faded. Not all at once, but in stages, like light leaving a room when clouds move across the sun. "What about them? I need you to listen all the way through. Please." He put his fork down carefully. His eyes searched my face. "Dad, what is going on? Have you noticed anything unusual? Anything that did not quite make sense? You are scaring me." I reached beside my chair and picked up the folder Hank had prepared. It was thick, neatly organized, tabbed with colored dividers. I set it on the table between us. At the graduation party, a woman who works at the venue warned me about Sloan. She led me to a back corridor. I overheard Sloan and Bryce talking. Daniel blinked. "You were hiding? At my graduation party?" "It was not like that. What did you supposedly hear?" "They were discussing the trust fund. The $15 million. Sloan said you would sign whatever she put in front of you. She said I needed to step aside." And Daniel, I paused because the next words were the hardest I had ever spoken to my son. "She has been poisoning me. Blood thinners in the smoothies she makes every morning. For 3 months." The color drained from his face. Then it came back, darker, flushed with something I had never seen directed at me before. "Anger. You are telling me," he said slowly, "that you eavesdropped on my girlfriend and then hired someone to investigate her." "I hired Hank Morrison, Catherine's friend. He is a former United States Marshal. I know who Hank is." Daniel's voice rose. "You hired a federal investigator to spy on the woman I love. I hired him to save your life." "Save me from what? From being happy? From being robbed? From being manipulated? From losing everything your mother and I built?" Daniel stood. His chair scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound sharp and ugly in the quiet room. "Open the folder," I said. "Please, just look at it." "I am not looking at it." Sloan's real name is Sloan Whitfield. Her family went bankrupt in 2019. In 2021, she moved to Jacksonville and stole $1.2 million from a man named Richard Kemp through a romance scam. Bryce Callahan had his law license revoked in Florida for stealing from a client. He has been siphoning $350,000 from our company through offshore accounts, and the warfarin in my blood. Stop. My toxicology results confirmed it, Daniel. Someone has been administering blood thinners to me without my knowledge. Your own doctor can verify it. This is not speculation. This is medical fact. He was shaking now, Not from cold, from something being torn apart inside him that he was not ready to let go of. "You always do this," he said, his voice cracking. "You always have to control everything. This is not about control. It is always about control with you." His eyes were wet. Mom knew it. She told me. She said you could never just let things be. She said you needed everything and everyone under your thumb, and that is why she was miserable the last years of her life. Because of you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stepped backward. My hand found the edge of the table for balance. "That is not true," I whispered. "It is true." Tears ran down his face. "And now I have finally found someone who loves me. Someone who actually believes in me. And you cannot stand it. So you hire investigators and build a case and try to tear her apart because you cannot accept that I do not need you anymore. Daniel, please. Mom would be ashamed of you." 5 words. 5 words that cut deeper than anything Sloan or Bryce had ever planned. Because they came from my son. And because some small, terrified part of me wondered if they might be true. He grabbed his jacket from the chair. "When you are ready to apologize, let me know. Until then, do not contact me." The front door slammed. The sound reverberated through the house, like the closing of something permanent. I stood in the dining room and listened to his car start, to the tires on gravel, to the engine fading down the oak-lined driveway until there was nothing left but silence. Catherine's pot roast sat on the table, barely touched. The folder lay exactly where I had placed it. Unopened. Unread. The evidence that could save his life, sitting 3 feet from where he had been sitting, and he had refused to look at it. My phone buzzed. A text from Sloan. "Victor, Daniel told me everything. I understand you are protective, and I respect that. I love your son more than anything. I hope we can work through this as a family." I stared at the screen. She already knew. Daniel had gone straight to her, told her everything I had said, and she had responded within minutes with a message so perfectly calibrated it could have been written by a public relations firm. She was not panicking. She was positioning. 20 minutes later, another buzz. "Hank, they know you are investigating. Bryce just called Carl Jessup." My chest tightened. "What did he say?" He said 2 words. Hank paused. "Move up." Move up what? Whatever they were planning. The timeline just compressed. Bryce told Jessup to have everything ready by this weekend. This weekend. 5 days away. Maybe fewer. I sank into the chair Daniel had vacated. The house was enormous and empty around me. Catherine's pot roast cooled on the table. The folder of evidence sat, untouched. And somewhere across Savannah, the woman my son loved was recalibrating her plan to kill me because I had made the mistake of trying to save him too soon. I had tried to protect my son, and in doing so, I had given them a reason to move faster. The evidence was real. The danger was real. And now the clock was running. Monday morning broke gray and heavy over Savannah. Victor had not slept more than 2 hours. He sat at the kitchen table at 6, coffee untouched, staring at Dr. Chen's lab report on his phone. 9 times therapeutic dose. Potassium chloride. Cardiac arrest within 12 hours. The numbers read like a countdown that had almost reached 0. At 8:15, he drove downtown to Henry Aldridge's office. The elevator doors opened on the 12th floor, and Henry was already standing, hands in his pockets, face drawn. "I read Chen's report at midnight," Henry said. "Sat with it for an hour, before I could form a sentence." Hank Morrison arrived 5 minutes later. He carried a leather folder, thick with printed surveillance logs, and placed it on the conference table without ceremony. Behind him came a woman Victor had never met. Mid-40s. Dark hair pulled back. Badge clipped to her belt. "Victor, this is Detective Amanda Park," Hank said. "Chatham County Major Crimes. 22 years on the force. I trust her with my life." Amanda shook Victor's hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes direct. "Mr. Manning, I've reviewed the materials Hank provided. The toxicology report alone gives us probable cause. But probable cause and a conviction are different animals. She sat down and opened a notebook. Sloan Whitfield is careful. Bryce Callahan is careful. If we move too early, they destroy evidence, lawyer up, and walk. I've seen it happen. So what do you propose? Victor asked. Amanda looked at Hank. Hank nodded. We propose you die, Amanda said. The room went silent. She let the words settle before continuing. Not actually, but convincingly enough that Sloan and Bryce believe their plan succeeded. A staged medical emergency. You collapse at home or in public. Paramedics rush you to Memorial Health. Doctor, Chen admits you to the cardiac unit under restricted access. The hospital lists your condition as critical. Henry leaned forward. And then? Then we watch, Amanda said. When a poisoner believes the victim is dying, they do one of two things. They either run, which gives us flight evidence and a warrant, or they come to finish the job, which gives us attempted murder on camera, in a controlled environment, with witnesses. Victor studied her face. There was no hesitation in it. How long would I need to stay in the hospital? 2 weeks minimum. Possibly 3. Long enough for Sloan to feel safe. Long enough for Bryce to make mistakes. Hank opened his folder. While Victor is in the hospital, my team continues digital surveillance. Bryce has been communicating with Carl Jessup through a burner phone. We've identified the number but need time to build a pattern. Every day Victor stays critical. They talk more freely. What about Daniel? Victor asked. The question changed the air in the room. Amanda answered carefully. Daniel cannot know. If he knows, his behavior changes. Sloan reads people. That's her skill. One wrong reaction from Daniel, and the entire operation collapses. Victor felt the weight of that sentence settle into his chest. His son would believe his father was dying. Daniel would grieve, pray, sit beside a hospital bed holding a hand that was pretending to be weaker than it was. The cruelty of it pressed against everything Victor believed about honesty between a father and child. I know what I'm asking, Amanda said quietly. I've been a parent for 19 years. This would break my heart too. But if Sloan succeeds, if she gets the trust, the insurance, the company, Daniel doesn't just lose money, he loses his life. Maybe not today. Maybe not next month. But eventually, she won't need him anymore. Victor looked at Catherine's ring on his finger. He turned it once. How do we begin? Henry spoke next. I'll prepare a revised will and power of attorney documents that appear to transfer authority to Daniel in the event of your incapacitation. These will be the bait. If Sloan and Bryce believe you're dying, they'll push Daniel to activate these documents. When they do, we'll have evidence of intent. I'll coordinate with Memorial Health Security, Amanda added. Hidden cameras in and around your room. Monitored hallways. Plainclothes officers on every shift. If anyone approaches you with harmful intent, we'll have it recorded from 3 angles. Hank slid a timeline across the table. Wednesday, you collapse. Thursday morning, the hospital issues a family notification. By Friday, Sloan hears the news through Daniel. We estimate first contact from Bryce to Carl within 48 hours. Victor read the timeline slowly. Each entry was precise times, locations, personnel, contingencies. Hank had built it the way Catherine used to build lesson plans. Thorough, sequential, leaving nothing to chance. There's one more element, Hank said. Rosa Dominguez. She started all of this. I want to bring her in as an additional witness. She heard the original conversation at the mansion. Her testimony connects Sloan and Bryce to premeditation. Where is she now? Victor asked. Still working catering jobs in Savannah. Single mother, 2 kids. She's scared, but she's willing. I spoke to her last night. Victor nodded slowly. Rosa had risked her livelihood to grab a stranger's wrist and say 5 desperate words. She deserved to be part of how this ended. Henry gathered the documents. Amanda closed her notebook. Hank, zipped the folder. Wednesday morning, Amanda confirmed. 9 o'clock. You'll be at the Savannah Civic Center for a routine business meeting. You'll feel chest pain. You'll collapse. Paramedics will arrive in 4 minutes. From that moment, Victor Manning is a dying man. Victor stood and walked to the window. 12 floors below, the Savannah River moved brown and slow beneath the morning clouds. Somewhere across this city, his son was waking up next to a woman who had tried to kill his father with a glass of orange juice. 2 weeks of silence. 2 weeks of letting Daniel believe the worst. 2 weeks of lying still, while the people who wanted him dead revealed themselves. He turned back to the room. Wednesday, he said. I'll be ready. Wednesday morning arrived with bright sun and a breeze that carried salt from the river. Victor dressed slowly. Gray suit. White shirt. Catherine's cufflinks, the silver pair she had given him on their 30th anniversary. He stood before the bathroom mirror and studied the man looking back. 61 years old. Lines around the eyes. Thinning hair at the temples. A face that had learned to carry weight without showing it. Today, that face would need to perform the most convincing lie of his life. He ate breakfast alone. Toast, black coffee, a sliced pear. The house was quiet in the way it always was now. Not peaceful, but hollow. Catherine's absence filled every room like a scent that never faded. At 8:20, his phone buzzed. Hank Morrison. One word. Confirmed. The paramedic team was in position. Dr. Sarah Chen was on standby at Memorial Health. Detective Amanda Park had 2 plainclothes officers inside the Savannah Civic Center and 1 unmarked car outside. Hidden cameras were already active in the hospital room 4th floor, cardiac unit, room 412. Victor picked up his keys, paused at the hallway portrait of Catherine, and whispered, "Here we go." The Savannah Civic Center hummed with Monday morning energy. Victor had scheduled a routine quarterly meeting with 3 contractors from Manning Development Group. Normal business. Normal setting. The kind of event no one would question. He arrived at 8:55 and shook hands in the lobby. Thomas was there playing his role as concerned brother, unaware of the exact timing but briefed on the plan. Henry Aldridge sat in the back row, pretending to review documents on his tablet. The meeting began at 9. Victor stood at the head of a long mahogany table, projector glowing behind him, 12 people listening. He discussed Q3 revenue, the Wilmington Island development, permit delays on the Hutchinson project. His voice was steady. His hands were calm. At 9:23, he stopped mid-sentence. He placed one hand flat on the table. The other rose to his chest. His breath shortened, not difficult to fake, because the fear underneath was real. His vision narrowed. He let his knees soften. "Victor?" Thomas stood immediately. Victor gripped the table edge. His face drained of color, partly performance, partly the genuine terror of surrendering control. He tried to speak, managed one word, chest, and then his legs buckled. He hit the floor on his left side. The room erupted. Thomas knelt beside him, shouting his name. A contractor called 911. Henry Aldridge moved to the door, blocking unnecessary traffic, his face a mask of rehearsed panic. A woman Victor did not know pressed her jacket under his head. Victor kept his eyes half closed. His breathing was shallow and deliberate. He could hear everything. Chairs scraping, voices overlapping, someone crying. Thomas repeating, "Stay with me, Vic. Stay with me." The paramedics arrived in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. 2 men and a woman, all briefed by Hank. They moved with genuine urgency, strapping monitors, inserting an IV line with saline, lifting Victor onto a gurney. The oxygen mask covered his face. Through its plastic edge, he watched the ceiling tiles of the Civic Center scroll past like a slow film. The ambulance ride lasted 11 minutes. One paramedic, a young man named Davis, leaned close and murmured, "Vitals look perfect, sir. You're doing great." Victor blinked once in acknowledgement. At Memorial Health, he was wheeled through a side entrance directly to the 4th floor. Dr. Chen met the gurney, clipboard in hand, expression professionally grave. Nurses moved around him with efficient choreography. Within 20 minutes, Victor Manning was lying in room 412, connected to monitors that beeped softly. An IV drip feeding saline into his arm. The door closed to all visitors except approved personnel. The room was private. Pale blue walls, a single window facing east, white curtains half drawn. A camera the size of a shirt button sat in the smoke detector above the door. A second camera hid inside the television mount. A third was embedded in the nurse call panel beside the bed. Amanda Park appeared at 10:15, dressed as a hospital administrator. Badge. Lanyard. Clipboard. The Civic Center footage is already circulating, she said. Local news picked it up. Savannah developer collapses. During meeting. By noon, everyone in this city will know, including Sloan, Victor said. Especially Sloan. At 11:40, Victor's phone, now monitored by Hank's team, received a call from Daniel. Victor answered with a voice he had practiced. Thin. Slow. Fragile. Dad? Oh God. Dad. Thomas just called me. Are you okay? What happened? I'm at Memorial, son. Cardiac unit. They're running tests. I'm coming right now. Daniel. Victor paused, letting silence do the work. I'm tired, son. Very tired. Daniel's breathing broke on the other end. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't go anywhere, okay? Just stay. The line went dead. Victor set the phone on the blanket and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent light above him buzzed faintly. Somewhere down the hall, a machine beeped in rhythm with someone else's heartbeat. He had just heard his son's voice crack with fear. That sound would stay with him longer than any poison, any document, any betrayal. The sound of a child terrified of losing his father, and the knowledge that the father had caused that terror deliberately, strategically, necessarily. Catherine would have understood. She would have hated it. But she would have understood. Daniel arrived at 12:03. Victor heard him before he saw him. Fast footsteps. A nurse's voice saying, "Family only, sir." Daniel's reply, "I'm his son." The door opened. Daniel's face was pale, eyes red. He crossed the room in 3 steps, took Victor's hand, and held it. "I'm here, Dad." Victor squeezed his son's fingers. The monitors beeped. The cameras recorded. And somewhere across Savannah, a woman named Sloan Whitfield was learning that the man she had tried to kill was finally dying. The trap was set. The first 2 days passed in careful monotony. Victor lay in room 412 and learned the rhythms of a hospital pretending to keep a man alive. Nurses rotated every 8 hours. Dr. Chen visited twice daily, adjusting IV bags that contained nothing but saline and vitamins, speaking loudly enough for any listener about cardiac enzyme levels and ventricular irregularities. The monitors beside Victor's bed displayed numbers that Hank's technician had calibrated to show a heart in slow decline. Daniel came every morning and every evening. He brought magazines Victor did not read. Coffee Victor pretended was too strong. And silence that neither of them knew how to fill. On Thursday night, Daniel sat in the chair beside the bed for 3 hours without speaking. He held his father's hand and watched the monitors as though willpower alone could keep the numbers stable. Victor wanted to tell him everything. The urge sat in his throat like a stone. But Amanda's words held firm. One wrong reaction from Daniel, and the entire operation collapses. So Victor squeezed his son's hand and said nothing. On Friday morning, Hank called from a burner phone. Bryce contacted Carl Jessup last night. 11:14 p.m. 47-second call. Hank's voice was flat, precise. He said, and I quote, "The old man is circling the drain. Start preparing the documents. We move the moment he flatlines or gets declared incompetent." Victor closed his eyes. Circling the drain. He was a human being reduced to a countdown in another man's schedule. What about Sloan? She searched. Cardiac arrest survival rate over 60 at 2 a.m. Then Georgia. Power of attorney. Medical incapacity. Then spousal rights inheritance, pending marriage. She's not even married to Daniel yet. No. But she's planning to be. Fast. My guess she pushes Daniel toward a quick engagement within days. A fiancé with a signed power of attorney has nearly the same legal standing in certain emergency provisions. Victor processed this. The chessboard was becoming visible every piece, every trajectory. One more thing, Hank added. She's coming to visit you today, Daniel told her this morning. She asked to bring flowers. Sloan Whitfield arrived at 2:17 p.m., carrying white lilies. Victor watched her enter through half-closed eyes. She wore a cream blouse, minimal jewelry, no makeup heavier than necessary. Her expression was soft, concerned, tender. The face of a woman visiting her boyfriend's dying father. She had rehearsed it the way an actress rehearses blocking. Every angle considered. Victor. Her voice was gentle. She placed the lilies on the windowsill and pulled a chair close to the bed. Daniel told me what happened. I've been so worried. That's kind of you, Sloan. She reached for his hand. Her fingers were cool and steady. No tremor, no hesitation. Victor let her hold his hand and studied her face at close range. The slight tilt of her head, the measured softness in her eyes, the way her lips curved into sympathy without reaching genuine emotion. She was, he realized, extraordinarily good at this. The doctors say it could be weeks, Victor said, keeping his voice thin. Or it could be tomorrow. They don't know. Don't talk like that. She squeezed his hand. You're strong. Catherine always said you were the strongest man she knew. The mention of Catherine's name from this woman's mouth nearly broke Victor's composure. He felt his jaw tighten and turned it into a cough. The monitors beeped. Sloan glanced at them with an expression that could have been concern or calculation. Daniel needs you, she continued. We both do. I want you to know whatever happens, I'll take care of him. I promise you that. The words landed precisely where she intended them. A dying father's comfort. A future daughter-in-law's devotion. A promise that carried, beneath its surface, the architecture of theft. That means a lot, Victor whispered. She stayed for 40 minutes. She spoke about Daniel's work, about a house they were considering in Ardsley Park, about a future that assumed Victor would not be part of it. Every sentence was a brick in a wall she was building around his son. When she left, she kissed Victor's forehead. He waited until her footsteps faded down the corridor. Then he looked directly at the camera hidden in the smoke detector. Did you get all of that? He said quietly. His phone buzzed. Hank. Every word. Every frame. She's perfect on camera, and I mean that in the worst possible way. Saturday brought Bryce Callahan. He arrived unannounced at 4:30 p.m., carrying a leather folder and wearing the confident smile of a man who believed the game was already won. He introduced himself to the floor nurse as Mr. Toothing, Manning's attorney, and was admitted after Daniel, sitting in the hallway, confirmed it. Victor watched Bryce enter and felt something shift in the room. With Sloan, there had been performance. With Bryce, there was efficiency. Victor. Bryce sat without being invited. He opened the leather folder on his knee. I know this isn't the best timing, but Daniel asked me to review a few things while you're still able to make decisions. Standard precautionary measures, power of attorney, medical directives, trust activation protocols. Daniel asked you, Victor repeated. He's worried. He wants to make sure everything is in order. In case. Bryce paused on the last two words with practiced gravity. Victor reached for the documents with a hand he made tremble. He scanned the first page, a revised power of attorney granting Daniel full control of Manning Development Group, with Bryce Callahan listed as legal executor. The second page was a medical directive authorizing treatment decisions by next of kin or designated representative. The third was a trust activation form, the same $15 million instrument from the graduation party, now with a clause permitting early release in the event of the grantor's incapacitation. Every document was a key to a different lock. Together, they opened everything. I'll need to read these carefully, Victor said. My eyes aren't what they were. Of course. Take your time. Bryce's smile did not waver. I'll come back Monday. He stood, shook Victor's limp hand, and walked out. His footsteps were unhurried. A man in no rush because he believed time was on his side. Victor waited 60 seconds. Then he pressed the nurse call button, the one Hank had rewired to alert Amanda Park's team directly. Amanda arrived within 8 minutes. Victor handed her the folder. He brought the bait to me, Victor said. Didn't even have to ask. Amanda opened the documents, scanning each page. A slow smile crossed her face, not warm, not amused, but satisfied the way a hunter is satisfied when the animal steps exactly where the trap was laid. Monday, she said. When he comes back for your signature, we'll be ready. She photographed every page, returned the folder to Victor's bedside table, and left. The room settled into silence. Evening light angled through the window, painting the white curtains amber. Victor lay still and listened to the monitors beep their false rhythm. 3 days in the hospital. Sloan had visited. Bryce had delivered documents. Carl was preparing offshore transfers. Daniel was grieving a death that had not happened. The trap was tightening. And Monday was close. Monday morning. Room 412. 7 a.m. Victor had been awake since 4. The hospital ceiling had become familiar. Each tile, each hairline crack, each shadow cast by the fluorescent panel. 12 days in this bed. 12 days of measured breathing, thin voices, and a body pretending to surrender while the mind sharpened itself like a blade on stone. Amanda Park arrived at 7:15 dressed in nurse scrubs. Blue standard issue, ID badge clipped to the pocket. She carried a breakfast tray and set it on the side table. Teams in position, she said quietly, adjusting the pillow behind Victor's head. 2 plainclothes in the hallway. 1 in the stairwell. 1 in the monitoring room, watching all 3 camera feeds. Hank is parked in the east lot with a direct line to my earpiece. And Daniel? Thomas is taking him to breakfast at the River Street Cafe. He won't be in the building until at least 10:30. That gives us a 3-hour window. Victor nodded. The plan required Daniel's absence. Whatever happened in this room today, his son could not witness it. Not because of weakness, but because Daniel's presence would give Bryce a reason to perform rather than reveal. Amanda placed a small device under Victor's blanket, a panic button wired directly to the officers outside. If anything deviates from the plan, press once. We're through the door in 4 seconds. She adjusted the breakfast tray, checked the camera angles on her phone, and left the room walking like a nurse who had done this 1,000 times. Victor ate dry toast and waited. Bryce Callahan arrived at 9:08 a.m. He walked in carrying the same leather folder from Saturday, plus a silver pen that caught the overhead light. His suit was navy, pressed, expensive. His confidence preceded him like cologne. Good morning, Victor. How are we feeling? Tired, Victor said. His voice was paper thin, practiced. But the doctors say, stable. Stable is good. Stable gives us time to handle business. Bryce pulled the chair close and opened the folder on the bed rail. It would give him peace of mind, and frankly, it would give me peace of mind too. Victor studied the documents again. Power of attorney. Medical directive. Trust. Activation. Each page crisp. Each signature line marked with a yellow tab. Walk me through them one more time, Victor said. Slowly. My head isn't clear. Bryce obliged. He explained each document with the patience of a man who smelled the finish line, enunciating legal terms, pointing to clauses, emphasizing the word protection as though it were a gift he was offering rather than a lock he was installing. Victor listened and let the cameras listen with him. This clause here, Victor said, pointing to the trust activation form. Early release in the event of incapacitation. Who determines incapacitation? Two physicians and the legal executor, Bryce said. Standard procedure, and the legal executor would be me. Bryce said it without blinking. As designated by the trust amendment filed last March, the amendment I never signed. The room changed. Bryce's pen stopped moving. His eyes lifted from the document to Victor's face. For the first time in their acquaintance, Victor saw something behind the polish, a flicker of recalculation, fast and reptilian. Victor, you did sign it. At the March meeting. I have your signature on file. You have a forgery on file. Victor's voice was no longer thin. It was level, clear, and carried the weight of 12 days of silence breaking open. I never attended a March meeting. I was in Charleston for Catherine's memorial service. Henry Aldridge can confirm the date. So can the hotel registry, the florist, and the 47 people who were there. Bryce closed the folder slowly. I think you're confused, Victor. The medications. The medications are saline. I've been fully alert for 12 days. Every visit you've made, every document you've brought, every word you've spoken in this room has been recorded by 3 cameras and a digital audio system monitored by Chatham County Major Crimes. Bryce stood. The chair scraped against the floor. His face underwent a transformation that Victor would remember for years. Charm dissolving like sugar in acid, revealing something cold and angular beneath. You're bluffing. Detective Park, Victor said calmly. The door opened. Amanda walked in, badge now visible on her belt, followed by 2 plainclothes officers. One positioned himself at the door. The other stood beside Bryce. Bryce Callahan, Amanda said. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder by poisoning, forgery of legal documents, and embezzlement of corporate funds. You have the right to remain silent. Bryce's eyes swept the room cameras, officers, Amanda's badge, Victor sitting upright in a bed that had never held a dying man. His jaw worked silently. Then he did something Victor did not expect. He laughed. A single short breath of a laugh, not amused but admiring, the way a gambler acknowledges a superior hand. The waitress, Bryce said quietly. It was the waitress. Wasn't it? Victor said nothing. The officer turned Bryce around and placed handcuffs on his wrists. The click echoed in the small room, like a period at the end of a very long sentence. Amanda read the remaining rights as they walked him into the corridor. His footsteps faded steady. Unhurried even now. Victor exhaled. His phone buzzed. Hank. Callahan is in custody. Carl Jessup picked up at his hotel 20 minutes ago. Offshore accounts frozen as of 8 a.m. by federal order. 2 down. 2 down. But not 3. Victor typed back. Sloan? Hank's reply came in 11 seconds. Gone. Apartment cleared out. Phone off. She ran. Victor set the phone on the blanket and stared at the empty chair where Bryce had been sitting. The leather folder still lay on the bed rail, open to the signature page, the silver pen resting across it like a fallen sword. Bryce was caught. Carl was caught. The money was frozen. The evidence was overwhelming. But Sloan Whitfield, the architect, the poisoner, the woman who had kissed Victor's forehead in this very room, was somewhere in the wind, and she had one weapon none of them could freeze or confiscate. Daniel's heart. Victor pressed the call button. Amanda returned within minutes. We need to find her before she contacts Daniel, Victor said. If she reaches him first, she doesn't need documents. She just needs his trust. Amanda nodded. APB is already out. Airports, bus stations, rental agencies. Hank has her vehicle description on every scanner in 3 counties. That's not enough, Victor said. She won't run far. She'll run toward Daniel. That's her only play now. Amanda looked at him for a long moment, then pulled out her phone and made a call. Victor swung his legs off the bed for the first time in 12 days. His muscles protested. The floor was cold under his bare feet. He stood slowly, gripping the bed rail, and felt the room sway before settling. He had played dead long enough. Victor changed out of the hospital gown in 90 seconds. Hank had brought clothes that morning: dark jeans, a gray pullover, boots. Practical. The kind of outfit a man wears when he does not know where the day will take him. Victor's legs shook as he dressed. 12 days of lying still had thinned his muscles, and the warfarin damage from months of poisoning still lingered in his joints like rust in old hinges. He did not care. His son was unprotected. Amanda Park drove. Unmarked sedan, scanner crackling on the dashboard. Morning traffic parting around them like water around a stone. Hank sat in the back, phone pressed to his ear, coordinating with 3 separate teams. Her car was spotted on I-16 westbound at 8:42. Hank reported. White Audi. Georgia plates. She exited at Pooler. Her mother lives in Pooler, Victor said. She's not going to her mother. She turned south on Route 17. Toward Tybee, toward Daniel. Victor felt the math collapse into a single line. Sloane had not run away. She had run toward the only asset she had left. A 29-year-old man who still believed she loved him, who did not know about the poison or the forged documents or the offshore accounts or the silver pen that had waited 12 days for a dying man's signature. Has anyone contacted Daniel? Victor asked. Thomas is with him at the River Street Cafe, Amanda said. I told Thomas to keep him there, but I didn't explain why. If Daniel gets a call from Sloane before we reach him, he'll go to her, Victor finished. He'll go to her and she'll convince him this is a misunderstanding. She's had 18 months to build his trust. We've had 12 days. Amanda pressed the accelerator. At 9:31, Victor's phone lit up. Daniel calling. Victor answered. Son. Dad. What's going on? Thomas won't let me leave the cafe. He says something happened at the hospital. Are you okay? The nurse said you checked out. Daniel, listen to me. I'm fine. I'm healthy. I'll explain everything. But right now I need you to stay with Thomas. Do not leave that cafe. Do not answer calls from anyone except me. Dad, you're scaring me. Good. Stay scared. Stay with Thomas. I'm coming to you. He hung up before Daniel could argue. The sedan crossed the Tybee Island Bridge at 60 miles per hour. Marsh grass blurred on both sides. The morning sky was cloudless, bright, indifferent. The kind of sky that does not care what happens beneath it. Hank's phone buzzed. He listened for 10 seconds, then spoke. Sloane's Audi is parked outside the Tybee rental house. She went inside 7 minutes ago. She's packing, or planting a story, Amanda said. How far are we? Victor asked. 4 minutes. They arrived at the white clapboard house at 9:47. Blue shutters. Wind chimes. The same porch where Victor had walked 12 days ago, carrying a sterile vial in his jacket. Sloane's white Audi sat in the driveway, trunk open, 2 suitcases already loaded. Amanda called for backup. 2 patrol units, ETA 6 minutes. We don't wait, Victor said. Mr. Manning. She is in that house collecting whatever she needs to disappear. If she reaches Daniel by phone before we stop her, she will twist every piece of evidence into a story about a paranoid old man persecuting his son's girlfriend. I have watched her operate for months. She does not need documents. She needs 5 minutes. And a telephone. Amanda studied his face. Then she opened her door. They approached the house from 3 sides. Amanda at the front. Hank circling to the back porch. Victor standing on the walkway between the Audi and the front steps. His position was deliberate. He was not a police officer. He could not make an arrest, but he could stand in the path of the woman who had poisoned him and let her see that he was alive, upright, and unbroken. The front door opened. Sloane stepped onto the porch carrying a leather bag and a phone pressed to her ear. She was mid-sentence. Daniel, baby, listen to me. Your father is not well. He's been... She saw Victor. The phone stayed at her ear, but her mouth stopped moving. For 3 full seconds, she stood frozen on the porch cream blouse, hair pulled back, sunglasses pushed up on her head. The wind chimes rang once behind her. "Hang up the phone, Sloane," Victor said. Her eyes moved from Victor to Amanda's badge to Hank emerging from the side of the house. The calculation was visible, rapid, practiced, searching for an exit that did not exist. She lowered the phone slowly. From the speaker, Daniel's voice. "Sloane? Sloane? What's happening?" Victor stepped forward and spoke loudly enough for his son to hear. "Daniel, it's Dad. I'm standing in front of Sloane right now. I am not sick. I was never dying. Everything I'm about to tell you is the truth, and I have the evidence to prove every word." Silence from the phone. Sloane's composure cracked. Not dramatically, not tears, not screaming. A fracture. The mask shifted half an inch, and behind it Victor saw what he had always suspected. Not evil in the theatrical sense, but something emptier. A person who had learned to simulate love so perfectly that she had forgotten or never known what the real thing felt like. "You don't understand what I came from," Sloane said quietly. Her voice was steady but stripped of performance. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything and have no one." "You're right," Victor said. "I don't. But you tried to kill me. You poisoned my food for 3 months. You forged documents to steal my son's inheritance. And right now, you're on the phone trying to convince him that I'm the villain." Amanda stepped onto the porch. "Sloane Whitfield, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and embezzlement." Sloane did not resist. She set the phone on the porch railing, placed her hands behind her back, and let Amanda apply the handcuffs. Her face was blank, not defeated, not defiant. Finished. Victor picked up the phone. Daniel, his son's breathing was ragged. "Dad, what is happening? Come to the house. Thomas will drive you. I'll be here. And son, bring the evidence folder. The one I gave you 2 weeks ago. The one you never opened." A long pause. Then, very quietly, "Okay." Victor hung up and sat down on the porch steps. His legs had finally given out, not from illness, but from the weight of everything that had just ended, and everything that was about to begin. The wind chimes sang. The marsh stretched silver under the morning sun. Patrol cars appeared at the end of the street. Lights turning slowly. He waited for his son. Daniel arrived at 10:34. Thomas's truck pulled into the gravel driveway and stopped behind the patrol cars. The engine cut. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the passenger door opened and Daniel stepped out holding a manila folder pressed against his chest like a shield. He looked older than 29. His eyes were swollen. His shirt was wrinkled, the same one from yesterday, Victor realized. His son had not gone home last night. He had stayed at the cafe with Thomas. Waiting, not sleeping, not understanding. Victor stood from the porch steps. His legs held. Daniel walked toward him slowly. 10 feet. 5. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at his father with an expression Victor had never seen on his son's face. Not anger, not grief, but something between surrender and a question that had no words. "You're not sick," Daniel said. "No, you were never sick." "No, son, I wasn't." Daniel's jaw tightened. His eyes moved to the patrol cars, to the officers standing near the Audi, to the empty porch where wind chimes turned in circles without sound. "Where is Sloane?" "In custody. Arrested 30 minutes ago." Daniel closed his eyes. He stood perfectly still for 5 seconds, long enough for Victor to count his son's breaths. Then he opened his eyes, climbed the 3 porch steps, walked past his father, and entered the house. Victor followed. The dining room table still held the remnants of Sloane's packing an open jewelry box, a stack of papers, a phone charger coiled like a small snake. Daniel sat in the chair at the head of the table. The same chair where Victor had refused to drink orange juice 12 days ago, and placed the manila folder flat in front of him. He did not open it. "Tell me," Daniel said. Before I read anything, tell me yourself. Everything. Victor sat across from him. The table between them was 4 feet wide. It felt like a canyon. He began with the graduation party. Rosa's hand on his wrist. The storage corridor. Sloane's voice saying, "The old man needs to step aside." He described the smoothie's warfarin. 3 months. Doses calibrated to mimic natural heart failure. He explained the forged trust amendment, the disbarment Bryce had hidden, the $350,000 siphoned through shell companies. He recounted the Friday dinner where Sloane had served risotto with the same steady hands that had been poisoning his morning drinks. He described the brunch orange juice laced with warfarin at 9 times therapeutic dose plus potassium chloride. 1 glass. Cardiac arrest within 12 hours. Daniel listened without interrupting. His hands lay flat on the table. His breathing was controlled, the deliberate control of a man holding himself together through architecture, through structure, through the refusal to collapse. Victor continued. The staged collapse at the Civic Center. The 12 days in room 412. The saline 4. The calibrated monitors. The cameras hidden in the smoke detector and television mount. Sloane's visit with white lilies and Catherine's name on her lips. Bryce's leather folder and silver pen. The arrest that morning. Carl Jessup in custody. Offshore accounts frozen. When Victor finished, the room was silent. Morning light fell across the table in long rectangles. Dust floated in the beams. Daniel opened the folder. He read slowly. Each page turned with care Hank's background report on Sloane. The Jacksonville fraud file. The toxicology panel. The forged signatures. The offshore transfer records. Sloane's search history printed in small font across 3 pages. Warfarin dosage lethal. Blood thinner symptoms elderly. Georgia inheritance process. Spousal rights. Corporate shares. Halfway through, Daniel's hands began to shake. He pressed them flat against the table again. He kept reading. At the final page, Dr. Chen's lab report on the orange juice, Daniel stopped. He stared at the numbers. 9 times therapeutic dose. Potassium chloride. Cardiac arrest. 6 to 12 hours. She poured this for you, Daniel said. His voice was barely audible. She poured this for you. And I was sitting right there. You didn't know, son. I handed you the glass. Daniel's voice cracked on the last word. At the brunch. She poured it, and I passed it to you. I remember. I said, "Here, Dad." I smiled when I said it. Victor reached across the table and placed his hand over Daniel's. You handed your father a glass of juice at a family brunch. That is what a good son does. What she put in that glass is not your guilt to carry. Daniel pulled his hand away, not in anger, but because the contact was too much. He pushed back from the table and stood. He walked to the window and looked out at the marsh. His shoulders rose and fell twice. I loved her. I know. I was going to ask her to marry me. Next month. I had the ring. Thomas helped me pick it. Victor said nothing. Some truths require only witness, not response. She used Mom's recipe, Daniel whispered. She found Mom's journal and cooked from it. She put magnolias on the table. Mom's flowers. And the whole time, his voice broke. He pressed his forehead against the window glass and let out a sound that was not crying but something deeper. The sound of a foundation cracking, of a structure a young man had built his future on revealing itself as hollow. Victor stood and crossed the room. He placed his hand on his son's back between the shoulder blades, where he used to rest his palm when Daniel was small and frightened of thunderstorms. She cannot hurt us anymore, Victor said quietly. The evidence is overwhelming. Henry and Amanda have everything. The legal process will be thorough, and it will be just. Daniel turned from the window. His face was wet. He looked at his father with eyes that held something new, not the admiration of childhood or the rebellion of youth, but the raw, unfinished recognition of a man realizing that the person he trusted most had been right all along. I didn't open the folder, Daniel said. 2 weeks ago, You gave it to me, and I called you paranoid. I said Mom would be ashamed, and you let me walk out. You needed to walk out, and you needed to walk back. Daniel wiped his face with both hands. He looked at the folder on the table, then at his father. What do we do now? Victor gestured toward the porch. We sit outside. Thomas will bring coffee. And when you're ready, not now, not today, but when you're ready, we start rebuilding. The company, the trust, the house. All of it. They walked onto the porch together. The marsh stretched wide and silver under a sky that had not changed. Patrol cars idled at the curb. Thomas leaned against his truck, arms folded, waiting with the patience of a man who had been a brother long enough to know when to speak and when to simply remain. Daniel sat in the rocking chair on the left. Victor sat on the right. Neither spoke for a long time. The wind chimes turned slowly. Somewhere in the marsh, a heron lifted from the water and climbed into the empty blue. It was not forgiveness yet. It was not healing. It was two men sitting side by side in the wreckage, agreeing without words that the wreckage was shared and that they would face what came next together. It was enough. 6 months later, Victor Manning stood in a ballroom he did not recognize, not because the room was unfamiliar. The Forsyth Park mansion had hosted 100 events in its history, galas, weddings, charity dinners, and Victor had attended at least a dozen. But tonight the room held something it had never held before, purpose that belonged to him. 300 guests filled the space. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across white linen tables. A string quartet played softly near the garden doors. On a banner above the stage, gold letters read, "The Catherine Manning Foundation Inaugural Gala." Victor adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. Gray suit, white shirt, Catherine's silver cufflinks. The same outfit he had worn the morning he collapsed at the Civic Center. This time his heartbeat was real. "You ready?" Thomas appeared beside him, hands in his pockets, the faintest smile on his weathered face. "No," Victor said. But Catherine never let that stop her either. The trial had ended 11 weeks ago. Bryce Callahan was sentenced to 25 years. Conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, forgery, embezzlement of $350,000. His attorney had argued diminished judgment. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and returned unanimous on every count. Bryce stood motionless as the verdict was read. He did not look at Victor. He did not look at anyone. Sloan Whitfield received 18 years. Attempted murder by poisoning. Conspiracy. Identity fraud. The Jacksonville case against Richard Kemp had been reopened and folded into the Savannah prosecution. During sentencing, she made a brief statement. She said she was sorry. She said she had been desperate. She did not cry. Victor watched her face and saw the same emptiness he had seen on the Tybee porch, a person who understood the words of remorse without access to their meaning. Carl Jessup pleaded guilty to accessory charges and received 7 years. He cooperated fully. His testimony confirmed the timeline Hank had built 18 months of planning, from the charity event where Sloan first met Daniel to the brunch where she served the final dose. The offshore accounts, $350,000 across 4 shell companies, were frozen and recovered. Henry Aldridge restructured the Manning Trust, removing every clause Bryce had inserted. The $15 million remained intact. Manning Development Group resumed operations under Victor's direct oversight, with Daniel joining as junior partner. Justice, Victor learned, was not a single moment. It was a process slow, grinding, unglamorous. It arrived not with thunder but with paperwork, depositions, and the quiet closing of courtroom doors. Rosa Dominguez sat at table 7. Victor had insisted. Front section, center line, clear view of the stage. She wore a navy dress new, purchased for the occasion, and her 2 children sat beside her. Maria, 12 now, and Tomas, 9. They fidgeted with cloth napkins and stared at the chandeliers with wide eyes. 3 weeks after the trial, Victor had called Rosa into his office. She arrived nervous, hands clasped, expecting nothing. He offered her a full-time position as community liaison for the Catherine Manning Foundation's salary, benefits, college fund for both children. She stared at him for 10 seconds before speaking. "Why?" she had asked. "Because you grabbed a stranger's wrist at a party and told the truth when it would have been easier to walk away. That's the kind of person Catherine would have wanted on her team." Rosa accepted. She had not missed a single day of work since. Tonight, from the stage, Victor would announce the Foundation's first initiative, a $2 million scholarship program for single parents pursuing nursing and medical degrees in Chatham County. Rosa had helped design it. Every application form carried Catherine's name at the top and Rosa's signature at the bottom. Daniel found Victor in the hallway before the speech. He looked different now. Not older, though. 6 months had added a gravity to his face that had not been there before, but clearer. The confusion was gone. The anger had softened into something more durable. Understanding. They had spent the first month barely speaking. Not from hostility, but from the sheer volume of what needed to be processed. Sloane's arrest. The poisoning. The 12 days of performed death. The manila folder Daniel had finally read at the Tybee kitchen table. Each revelation required its own grief, its own digestion. In the second month, Daniel began visiting the estate on Sundays. He brought takeout. They ate in the kitchen without ceremony. Conversation was sparse work, weather, Thomas's boat, but the presence was steady. A son returning. One meal at a time. By the 4th month, Daniel asked Victor to teach him Catherine's recipes. They started with the lemon rosemary chicken, the same dish Sloane had weaponized. Daniel cooked it slowly, following Catherine's handwritten instructions. And when it came out of the oven, he stood in the kitchen holding the pan and said quietly, "This was always Mom's. She doesn't get to own it." Victor had never been prouder of his son. Now, in the hallway, Daniel straightened Victor's tie, a gesture so natural, so inherited, that Victor almost heard Catherine's voice in it. "Good speech?" Daniel asked. "Short," Victor said. "Your mother hated long speeches," Daniel smiled. "It was small, still careful, but real." "Go get them, Dad." Victor walked onto the stage at 8:15 p.m. The applause rose and fell. 300 faces looked up at him. He gripped the podium and let the silence settle. 6 months ago, I lay in a hospital bed pretending to die. I did this because people I trusted were trying to make it real. I survived not because I was strong, but because a woman I had never met grabbed my arm at a party and said 5 words. "Don't let him sign those papers." He paused. The room was still. My wife Catherine believed that courage is not the absence of fear. It is one person deciding that someone else's safety matters more than their own comfort. Rosa Dominguez made that decision. Tonight, this foundation exists because of her. He looked at table 7. Rosa's eyes were bright. Maria held her mother's hand. The Catherine Manning Foundation will fund scholarships, legal aid, and crisis support for families targeted by financial predators. Because what happened to my family was not unique. It happens in homes across this country quietly, methodically, to people who trust the wrong person for the right reasons. He looked at Daniel, standing beside Thomas near the garden doors. My son Daniel is the bravest person in this room. Not because he fought, because he came back. Because he sat at a kitchen table and read the truth about someone he loved. And he did not break. He bent, and then he stood up. Daniel held his father's gaze. He did not look away. Victor folded his notes. He had one more thing to say, and it did not require paper. Catherine used to tell me that the measure of a family is not what it survives, but what it builds after. Tonight, we start building. The applause began. Victor stepped back from the podium. The string quartet resumed. Waiters moved between tables carrying plates. The ordinary machinery of an evening resumed around a room that had, for 3 minutes, held its breath. Later that night, long after the guests had gone, after Thomas had driven home, after Daniel had hugged his father in the parking lot and said, "Same time Sunday?" Victor sat alone at the kitchen table of the Manning estate. Two photographs stood before him. Catherine on the left, smiling in the garden, summer light in her hair. Daniel on the right, graduation day, cap tilted, laughing at something off camera. Between them, a small white card. Rosa's handwriting. The phone number she had pressed into his palm 6 months ago in a storage corridor while his world was falling apart. Victor turned the card over. On the back, in his own handwriting, he had added 3 words the night before the gala. She was right. He placed the card in Catherine's recipe book between the lemon rosemary chicken and the peach cobbler and closed it. Then he turned off the kitchen light, climbed the stairs, and slept the way a man sleeps when the longest season of his life has finally, mercifully, ended. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell icon, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every story we tell is a reminder that truth, courage, and family are worth fighting for. See you in the next one.